Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. We are back here today with less than 4 weeks until fans return to Ross-Ade Stadium for another season of Boilermaker football. We are going to continue our countdown to kickoff series here today with a deep look at Purdue's schedule. We'll go at least a little bit in depth on all of Purdue's 2023 opponents here today. And we're going to talk about the schedule both, at the micro level on a game-by-game basis and, at a macro level a little bit, looking at different stretches and just the schedule overall, which, if you look at any of the toughest schedule metrics that are out there, it is among the nation's toughest. But of course, there was some big news in the Big Ten on Friday as Oregon and Washington have been accepted into the league. The Big Ten now sits at 18 teams beginning a year from now. I'm going to talk about that at the end of today's show. I know a lot of people are burnt out on the conference realignment conversation. I know to a certain degree I am as well. So we're going to push that to the end. If you don't really want to listen to it, then, I'll give you a heads up, bow out, no worries at all. I get it. For those of you who want to hear a little bit more about that, I'll be talking about that from a very Purdue-specific lens. But lots to get into here today. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Lots of thoughts there, lots of commentary there, especially as we get closer to actual games to talk about. And be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if there's anything you want me to talk about on the show, send me a DM on Twitter @BoilersBeyond, or you can always email me boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Let's get into the schedule, though. This is something that a couple of listeners suggested I do, kind of an in-depth breakdown looking at all of Purdue's opponents this year. And of course, we're going to start at the top here. 27 days from now, I'm recording this Sunday, August 6th. It's 11:30 a.m. as I record this. The band will be getting ready to get on the field for the pregame in 27 days from this moment. It is nearing quick. September 2nd, noon kick, Purdue versus Fresno State. The third team of the current Mountain West members to face off with Purdue, joining Hawaii and Nevada. Probably some not great memories from those games if you're a Purdue fan. So Purdue will hope to flip the script a little bit, referring to the loss at Hawaii in 2006 and the loss at Nevada to kick off the 2019 season. Look, this is not an easy game. This is not your typical Group of Five program. This is not the typical MAC level opponent that you see a lot of Big Ten teams play when they get into the Group of Five. Fresno State's a really good one. They enter on a 9-game win streak dating back to last October. It was a really rough start to the year for Fresno State, but they figured it out, and they put together a really nice season last year. A lot of new pieces on the offensive side of the ball for the Bulldogs. Jake Haener was their all-everything quarterback. He was a really, really good Group of Five quarterback. He moves on to the NFL. Their top running back moves on. Their top 2 or 3 pass catchers all depart. So it's going to look really different on offense. They've got a transfer from UCF who has some starting experience, Mikey Keene. Maybe he's the starter. They also have an in-house guy, a guy who's been in the program a bit, who could start as well. There's not really any reason for them to name a quarterback yet, so we'll get into that much more when we preview the Fresno State game on game week. But they do figure to be really strong on the defensive end. They had a nice defense a year ago, and they bring back 7 starters. They're going to be tough on that side of the ball. This is not necessarily the ideal game to break in a new coach and new systems on both sides of the ball. Fresno State's a good solid Group of Five roster. They have good players, and Jeff Tedford is a really good coach. He's the last guy to really win at Cal, a program that, really is hot garbage ever since he departed. He's done really well at Fresno State. This is not going to be an easy game. You look on the odds markets right now, Purdue's about a 6-point favorite here. So it's not like Purdue is some overwhelming favorite. It's not like this is being viewed as a game where Purdue is going to cakewalk to a victory. However, if Purdue is a legitimate bowl team, and what I mean by that is if Purdue is a good enough team that they are a bowl team, if they're going to go 6-6, this is a game they should win by simply being the better team. The path to a bowl game gets really shaky with an 0-1 start before you go into 11 straight power conference opponents. This is a really big one, not just in terms of this season, but you want to set the tone for the Ryan Walters era with a win. You want to get it off to a good start. By all accounts, ticket sales are going really well right now. It should be a well-attended game. A lot of enthusiasm, debuting the new renovations. There's a lot of juice behind this one. This is one Purdue's got to have. And it's probably not the best opponent to play for a gotta-have-it game, because anytime you have a Power 5 group of 5, it looks really bad when you lose that game, no matter how good the group of 5 is. This is one that you need to win. This is one that if Purdue's going to be good this year, they've got to win it. Week 2, we finally get the return game, Purdue Virginia Tech. Who could ever forget the 2015 bludgeoning Virginia Tech gave Purdue in Ross-Ade Stadium? A lot has changed with these two programs since then. Both teams have moved on from the coach that coached them in that game and had a coaching change since. Frank Beamer was still coaching Virginia Tech back then when they won 51-24 at Purdue in 2015. And Darrell Hazel was leading the Boilermakers. Beamer retired. Hazel was fired. Justin Fuente came to Blacksburg and was fired. Jeff Brom came to West Lafayette and departed for Louisville back in December. So very different programs than we saw at that time. Not for the better for Virginia Tech. Purdue has certainly improved since then. The Hokies have certainly gone backward. Brent Pry is the head coach out there now. He was a former Penn State defensive coordinator. 3-8 last season. Not a good year. Things have really fallen off from the glory days of Virginia Tech football. There are real questions about this team on offense. They really struggled to put points on the board last year. Questions at quarterback. They have no idea. They've got Grant Wells, their returning quarterback. They brought in a transfer from Baylor. Neither guy's really grasped the job yet. We'll see what things look like for them at the quarterback spot, but I'm not expecting all ACC type of play there. And there are questions on the offensive line. So, if they don't have a great quarterback, they don't have a great offensive line, it's reasonable to think that moving the ball for them could be tough. It's going to be a good defense, though. Brent Pry did a nice job there last year, really instilling some confidence into the defense. They weren't great, but they were solid. And I think, with a defensive-minded head coach, it's reasonable to think that their defense could take a step forward again this year. It's going to be a difficult atmosphere. It's a nice thing for Purdue, if you ask me, that this is a noon game. You don't get them under the lights. You don't get the crowd all fired up after a day of drinking. I mean, it's a noon start. That's probably a good thing for Purdue. It's going to be a good measuring stick game. Purdue probably, maybe. I'm fairly confident that Purdue has the better roster here. Not positive, but Purdue certainly has the better quarterback. And that goes a long way here. Virginia Tech has not recruited at a very high level. Real deficiencies on offense. I think this is a game that's winnable for Purdue. It's not one that I'm sitting here saying it's a must win, because I think going to Blacksburg, with a roster full of a lot of guys that haven't played a ton of key snaps at high level football, it's going to be a challenge for Purdue. This is one where if Purdue can go in and get a win, I think it's going to reflect really positively on the coaching staff. If Purdue loses, it's not the end of the world. It's a tough place to play. This is a really big opportunity. Going to Virginia Tech is a chance to get a really big win early on in the season against a brand name that hasn't really lived up to that brand name level over the past few years. Speaking of return games in home and homes, Purdue gets a bit of a revenge spot in week 3 as they host Syracuse under the lights in Ross-Ade. The first NBC game for Purdue in the new Big Ten TV contract. Look, it's a revenge spot to some degree. Last year's game certainly gives Purdue plenty of reason to want revenge. However, half of Purdue's roster wasn't on the team last year for this game. So that changes things a bit. But the ones that did suit up for Purdue last year, they're going to be looking for revenge. This is a game that Purdue handed away last year to a level that you don't really see a whole lot. That was really something, the way Purdue threw that game away at the end there. Just bad all around, and it starts with Purdue's players. But, both teams lose a lot from last season. Syracuse lost a good amount of its key defenders and their all-everything running back, Sean Tucker. Obviously, Purdue, as we've talked about on the show, loses its 5 best players, loses its coach. Very new matchup here. Syracuse does return its quarterback, Garrett Schrader. Look, he wasn't very good against Purdue until that final throw when he hit the guy in the corner over Bryce Hampton to win it. They've got a new coordinator on both sides of the ball. I don't know how much things are going to change on defense. They're still going to go with that 3-3-5 look. But on offense, I think they're going to try to throw the ball more without Sean Tucker in the backfield. I think this is another good measuring stick game. Kind of with all of this, Purdue probably has the talent edge here. You just look at recruiting rankings. Syracuse does not recruit well. They've got a lot of problems getting players there. Not an easy place to win. That being said, Dino Babers is pretty solid. He, as a whole, I think he's done an all right job at Syracuse. In the ACC, they don't have many advantages there, but a good measuring stick game again. This non-conference, you look at it and it's tricky because there aren't any games that you look at and say, man, I just don't see Purdue winning that. Purdue will be favored against Fresno State. I think they'll be favored at home against Syracuse. At Virginia Tech, I think that's going to be somewhere around a pick'em to Virginia Tech -3. It's all of these games are going to be semi-toss-ups. Purdue has not gone unbeaten in non-conference since 2007. That is a stat that really needs to change. That is not a good stat to have. That reflects a number of things. Certainly, from 2008 to 2016, Purdue didn't have very many good teams. And then during the Jeff Brom era, Purdue scheduled pretty tough in the non-conference, and sometimes that backfired on them. And, sometimes they had games where they should have won, like last year, where, an undefeated non-conference was kind of handed to them and they couldn't take it. So this is one that, going undefeated in non-conference is a big ask because these are going to be 3 tough games in a row. But it's a big opportunity here because none of these games are overwhelmingly difficult to the point where it's not like it's an Ohio State or Michigan in the non-conference. You're not playing Alabama. You're not playing Notre Dame even. These are games that Purdue can win, and we're going to have a really good idea of where Purdue is after this because they start Big Ten with a really tough stretch. And it kicks off against Wisconsin, Friday night under the lights, the first conference game on a Friday in Ross-Ade Stadium history. Of course, they played on a Friday back in 2017 against Ohio. Purdue hasn't beaten Wisconsin since 2003, and they've had some opportunities the last couple of years against down Wisconsin teams and haven't really come close to taking advantage of it. Look, I know Wisconsin hired Phil Longo. I know that they're talking about that offense being much more wide open. I'm going to believe that Wisconsin is going to be a power running football team until I see otherwise in game action. Especially with this year. Braylon Allen is a legit running back. That roster, I know they overhauled it a bit in the portal with Tanner Mordecai at quarterback and some receivers in, but that roster is built to run the ball. And that has been what's given Purdue fit after fit against Wisconsin over the years. Wisconsin added a number of transfer portal receivers to try to get this offense going in the pass game. Tanner Mordecai was good at SMU. How can he make that jump to the Power 5 level, to the Big Ten level? I don't know. That's why I think they're going to run the ball quite a bit still, and because it's worked. It's been effective for them. They've been one of the most consistent programs in college football over the past couple decades on the back of a physical run game. The defense has given Purdue problems. They terrorized Aiden O'Connell the last 2 years. Those were, quite possibly Aiden O'Connell's 2 worst games as a starter at Purdue. He really struggled in those. Jim Leonard's gone, new defensive coordinator, but I don't know how much is going to change there. It's going to be a solid defense. Wisconsin had a really good coaching hire. Luke Fickell's a fantastic coach. This is a tough one. I've picked Purdue to win the last 2 years. I can promise you I'm not going to pick Purdue to win this game until they prove to me that they can. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool you 16 years in a row, or whatever it's been with Purdue and Wisconsin matching up. That goes to a whole new level. Ryan Walters can be the guy who ends it. This would be remarkable, to say the least, because, this stretch gets really tough because it's a lot of physicality. You welcome in Illinois the following week. Storylines galore in this one. Ryan Walters versus Brett Bielema. Purdue's won 14 of the last 18 in this series. And if you take out the Darrell Hazel stretch, 12 of the last 14. Purdue's been really good in this series, but again, this is following up Wisconsin with another physical team. Illinois has plenty of unknowns. They won 8 games a year ago, a really nice breakout season, and they get back the anchor of that defense with Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph at defensive tackle, but they lose a lot on the back end. They lose Devin Witherspoon, they lose Sidney Brown, a lot of new faces on the back end for Illinois. Even without Ryan Walters, though, I think they're going to have a real nice defense. I don't know, top 5, top 10 in the nation like it was last year. I don't know about that, but I think this is going to be a really good Illinois defense. On offense, I've got no clue. Luke Altmaier comes in to play quarterback. Didn't get a ton of action at Ole Miss. When he did play, very mixed results. Not a lot of known commodity there. How's the run game? No Chase Brown. They're still going to want to run the ball. They still have to. It's a Brett Bielema offense. How effective are they on the ground? Can they take the ball out of Altmaier's hands the way they were able to take the ball out of Tommy DeVito's hands quite a bit last year? Big one for Ryan Walters here. It's an important game, a rivalry game, his first one at Purdue. And, again, this is a program you're competing against quite a bit on the recruiting trail, in the division. As you look forward in the conference, this is very much a peer program that you want to be better than. So a really critical one for Purdue. And then they hit the road. Purdue, you end that stretch. 4 of Purdue's first 5 games are at home. And crazy to say that Purdue has 3 straight night games at home. Morgan Burke would not believe it if he was around to see this. Then Purdue goes to Iowa for another night game. I think I saw that's the NBC night game. So Purdue has 3 NBC night games in 4 weeks. Opportunity galore there to get some nice notice there. 3 straight games for Purdue where you're going to be playing a smash mouth style from the other team on offense. Iowa has been the butt of many jokes over the last couple years. Make all the jokes you want. I certainly participate in them. One of my best friends is a Hawkeye fan. Love making the jokes, but this is a rock solid program. You know, last year felt like they couldn't be any worse. Iowa still went 8-4, I think. And if Iowa wouldn't have inexplicably lost to Nebraska, Iowa would have won the Big Ten West and gone to Indianapolis. So it's a pretty solid program, especially when you consider that the quarterback position cannot get worse. Spencer Petras, Alex Padilla were terrible. Terrible. Cade McNamara comes in from Michigan, has demonstrated a level of competency that those 2 guys never did. So you're getting good improvement at quarterback, market improvement at quarterback. The offensive line was very un-Iowa-like last year, not a good one. I think they're going to take a step forward. They lose Riley Moss and Jack Campbell on defense and Lucas Van Ness. It's Iowa's defense. It's Phil Parker. It's going to be really good. And you factor in Iowa having one of the best special teams in the nation with LeVar Woods coaching it there. You know, this is a game, your margin for error is very low when you play against Iowa. You can't turn the ball over. You got to be really sound fundamentally because Iowa absolutely will be. Purdue's had some success, certainly under Jeff Brom against Iowa. Purdue went 4-2. This is going to be a challenge. I think if I had to make a Big Ten West prediction right now, I would go with Iowa winning it. I think they're going to be real solid. I think Purdue going to Iowa at this, as this 3rd straight game against a similar-minded program, you hope Purdue is in good shape health-wise because they're going to be taking some hits. They're going to be playing some real physical football for 3 weeks in a row there. And then after that, after you get all beat up against those physical teams, Ohio State comes in and they're going to try to throw the ball all over the place. Purdue has beaten Ohio State 5 times inside Ross-Ade Stadium since the turn of the century, 2000, 04, 09, 11, and 18. Purdue beat the Buckeyes at home. So there's your reason for optimism. It's happened before. Ohio State's loaded. This is a really good team. They were a field goal away from winning the national title last year. Not many teams can say that. The receiving core is insane. Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, Carnell Tate, Cade Stover at tight end. Really, really good receiving core at Ohio State. Going to be interesting to see what Purdue does there because Ryan Walters likes to play a lot of man coverage. I don't know that you can cover Marvin Harrison Jr. one-on-one. I don't know that you can cover Emeka Egbuka or Julian Fleming one-on-one. They're going to be really good. Whoever plays quarterback for Ohio State, probably going to be Kyle McCord. He's going to put up big numbers because that's what this offense does. The question for them comes down to the defense. Against Michigan and Georgia, that's what did them in. I don't know that, I don't expect Purdue to win this game. I don't know that I really expect Purdue to hang in there with Ohio State too much. But how good Ohio State's defense is probably dictates to what degree Purdue can hang in there with them. If the Buckeyes have a real good defense, then, this one could get out of hand. If they don't, you hope Purdue can at least put up some points and make this thing interesting into the second half. To this point, Ryan Day has avoided the inexplicable losses that plagued Urban Meyer. like the loss at Iowa in 2017 when they gave up 55 or whatever. Then the next year they lose by 29 at Purdue. Ryan Day has kind of avoided that. He's lost to Michigan. That's the worst thing you can do at Ohio State. But, as a whole, he's avoided that. A remarkable challenge for Purdue. And then they get a bye week at a very much needed time. Can rest up a little bit. Purdue will be 7 games in then. I think if you want to make a bowl game, you need to have 3 wins before the bye, because the schedule does lighten up a bit in the back end. But I don't think you want to go into the back end needing to win 4 out of 5. So I think if you have 3 wins going into the back end, bowl game's realistic. If you have 4 wins going to the back end, if you're somehow 4-3, you feel really good about your chances of going to a bowl game. Come out of that bye week to head to Lincoln. Nebraska embarking on a new era as well. Can Matt Rule be the guy to fix it? Lord only knows. On paper, he's a really good hire. He's turned around Temple and Baylor very well in his career. Certainly with Baylor, had a much bigger task at hand than what he has at Nebraska in terms of what he inherited. They love their quarterback, Jeff Sims, transfer from Georgia Tech. He's a dual threat guy, former 4-star recruit that they really like. We've kind of heard this about Nebraska quarterbacks too. Adrian Martinez, Casey Thompson, didn't really come to fruition. But, this is a pretty decent roster. You look at what Nebraska's recruited under Scott Frost. Talent-wise isn't the problem. It's just been the inexplicable lack of ability to put it all together. Whether that's strength and conditioning, or whether that's player development, whether that's all X's and O's. I mean, I don't know, but it just hasn't clicked. The culture was terrible there. And while I envy how much time Scott Frost got to spend on the golf simulator at work, I don't know that was a recipe for success with the football program. This is a real swing game. Nebraska's going to be favored here unless things just fall apart real quick for them. Purdue's won 4 out of the last 5 against Nebraska. It'd be massive to get a win in Lincoln. No doubt about it. It's not an easy place to play. They're going to pack that place for their Huskers no matter how good or bad they are. You go up there and get a win, and I think you feel really good about yourself. Before one, you go to Michigan. It's not going to be easy. It's just not. Purdue played them last year, hung in there for the first half, lost 43-22. And, you felt pretty good about the way Purdue played in that game. Michigan gets about everything back. They get everything back, and Purdue doesn't, to say the least. This season's going to be fascinating for Michigan. I don't really know what to expect. Jim Harbaugh gets suspended, really pointless. Can they take that next step? That's the real question. They're going to be really good. The question is, can they beat Ohio State again? Can they go win in the playoff? Talking about them at a level that is almost, unheard of for programs in the Big Ten besides Ohio State. So you go up there for a night game in November. You're going to be cold. Going to favor Michigan's style of play. I don't see Purdue really having a lot of success up there. Then Purdue starts the back end. The final 3 games with Minnesota at home. A really interesting one because Purdue had some battles with Minnesota. Jeff Brom and PJ Fleck didn't really like each other all that much, and they had some good battles. Last year, certainly one of them. Brom went 2-4, right, against Minnesota. Bookended it with wins with 4 losses in the middle. Speaking of dumb stories out of Big Ten Media Day, with Harbaugh getting suspended, the PJ Fleck hit piece that was just bizarre. We know PJ Fleck's weird. That was just pointless. Again, Minnesota's one where PJ Fleck probably limits their crazy upside because there are a lot of players who aren't going to want to play for him and kind of his shtick. But the guys who do really buy in, and they've been rock solid since they hired him. Year one was rough, but ever since then, they've been solid. I think Ethan Kaliak-Manis at quarterback could be pretty solid for them. Tanner Morgan never really improved, and in some ways he regressed quite a bit after 2019. They're going to try to open it up a little bit because they do, they lose Muhammad Ibrahim. The run game won't be as good as it was with him. But this program has been really consistent. They've been solid. And in the Big Ten West, that's all you need to be. Where they are late in the season, you never know. This is a game, again, where, this is a program like Illinois. Purdue and Minnesota are very, very much peers when you look at the outlook of the program in the long term. This is a program that you want to, nudge yourself ahead of and, head to head, see if they can do it this year to get started on that. And then you close with what quite possibly are the two most winnable games on your schedule. Lord knows what Northwestern's going to look like in late November. I've been pretty honest here that I thought Northwestern was going to stink this year. Even before the Pat Fitz stuff, I didn't think they were going to be very good. Now, I don't think the firing of Fitz was all that popular with the players. I don't think that was something that they really wanted. Obviously, it happened. Happened for a pretty legitimate reason. See how the rest gets litigated in court, but this could be one of the worst Big Ten teams we've seen in recent memory if this team kind of quits on them. I feel terrible for David Braun. You watched him at Big Ten Media Day. He was uncomfortable as all can be. He wasn't even there for any of it. He's been in Evanston for like 7 months now. Tough spot for him. Tough spot for the program. The roster doesn't have a lot of talent. And by November, you're going to be looking at guys having to make a decision whether they want to transfer and play football somewhere else or stick it out at Northwestern and get a degree. Guys aren't, assuming things don't go well for them, this is a game Purdue really almost no excuse to not win, and almost no excuse to not win comfortably. Before you come home, to close it out with the old Oaken Bucket against Indiana, Purdue's won 4 of the last 5 here. Things aren't particularly well in Bloomington. At the time, knowing everything they did after the 2020 season, Indiana made the right move to go all in on Tom Allen. You have to. You absolutely have to. After 2 really good years, 2 of the better years that program has had in the modern era. It hasn't worked out. Clearly, they've won 6 games over the last 2 years. Just, 2-16 in Big Ten play over the last 2 years. This year they went real portal heavy to try and flip it, which probably is the right move for Indiana. High school recruiting hasn't been a big strength of theirs. If the portal moves hit, anything's possible here. We'll see. They could flirt with 500 if the portal moves click and they really work out. I think Purdue has the better roster on paper. Returning production favors Purdue, and that's saying something because Purdue loses quite a bit. You need to win this game. No matter what happens in the regular season. Is this you've got 5 wins and can win it, go to a bowl game? Is this, it's been a rough year 1, but you want to close it out with a win over Indiana? I don't know. I don't know where Purdue will be here, but one thing is for sure, Ryan Walters comes in to a spot where the standard is beating Indiana again. Jeff Brom inherited a program that had lost 4 in a row to Indiana. He flipped that. Now Ryan Walters steps in, and his goal will be to maintain the success against Indiana and the keep the in-state advantage as it relates to this rivalry, both on and off the field when you look at the recruiting trail. But just some overall thoughts. This schedule's not easy. When maybe your 2 most winnable games are your last 2, it's not ideal. I think you'd want one of those to be right on the front end, but that's not the case. You got to deal with what you've got. You know how I feel about the non-conference. I have made it a point on this episode to not really talk about how difficult it is and how it doesn't really need to be that difficult, but none of the games are overwhelmingly hard. All winnable, all losable. I don't know how much it really matters, though, when you look at the Big Ten schedule. Getting both Ohio State and Michigan, not easy. That's a tough draw. Purdue kind of gets the karma for last year's easy schedule. And they won the Big Ten West out of it. They made the most of it. That Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa stretch, I don't like that at all. I don't like playing those 3 in a row. If you can get one out of those 3, that's a huge win. Close strong. The Vegas win total is 5 or 5.5 for a reason. It's a combination of the schedule not being easy, and it's a projection of Purdue's roster with a lot of unknowns. We're going to get more into that over the next 2 weeks with previewing the offense and defensive sides of the ball, but it's not going to be easy for Purdue to replace everything it lost from last year. For Purdue to go over that win total to get to a bowl, you need a lot of these portal pieces to hit. You need Hudson Card to do really well. And, you've got a first-time coaching staff. There are a lot of different things that come at you during the season that these guys haven't experienced before. So it's going to be fascinating. It's going to be an interesting season. Purdue has one of the tougher schedules in the nation. If Purdue could go to a bowl this year, I think it is a rousing success in year one of Ryan Walters. And then, you go from there. But that's where we're going to leave the schedule preview for today and get into the latest news in conference realignment with Washington and Oregon joining the Big Ten. This is sad. This is, as someone who grew up in love with college sports, who grew up loving college football, loving college basketball, this is a bummer. You watch the Pac-12 fall apart, and it's really, really disappointing. I fell in love with this sport because of how wide-ranging it was, how regional it is a special part of college sports, and that's all gone now. These moves are about both money and TV. And if you're a fan, none of that affects you. I'd be curious to know when we finally get financials revealed from this, how much Oregon and Washington joining the league brings in terms of money, a per year payout to Purdue. My guess is not a ton. But, this is what happens when Fox is the majority owner of the Big Ten network, right? They kind of call the shots around here now. It's not as much in the university president's hands as it used to be. Because as I've kind of brought up last week, from Purdue, this is not just a Purdue, from the black and gold lenses, this is not a good thing. You just added 2 more schools that historically are better college football programs than you. Both these programs, Oregon and Washington, have played in the college football playoff. Oregon's played for 2 national championships in the last 15 years. 2010, they lost to Auburn. 2014, they lost to Ohio State in championship games. Washington got to the playoff in 2016, I think. These are on top of USC and UCLA. Certainly USC is a blue blood, and UCLA is consistently competitive. This isn't a great thing for Purdue, from a competitive standpoint. Now, Purdue's invested in football at a higher level over the past 5 to 10 years. That's got to continue. Purdue's got to continue elevating its brand in football to compete here, because you look at it right now, 18 teams in the Big Ten, you're in the bottom half, without a doubt. You might be, flirting with the bottom third in terms of just stature of your football program. Purdue's got to keep getting better. What's realistic to expect from Purdue moving forward? Boy, it's tough. Competitively, this isn't great. I think at some point the Big Ten's got to move to 10 conference games. I think that's probably the next step here. And with scheduling that, I have no clue how that's going to work out. But, if you just split the power players, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, Oregon, Washington, Wisconsin, you're getting 3, 4, 5 of those schools every year on your schedule. That's tough. That's really tough. You're going to make a lot of money off this, but, if you're a Purdue fan, you don't see any of that money. It's good to be in the league that's deemed stable. It's good to be where the money is, without a doubt. You're not Oregon State or Washington State. Thank the Lord if you're Purdue, and God bless those fans of those schools that are really going through it right now. For basketball, this doesn't affect Purdue. Purdue's better than both those programs. I don't know how much those programs really care about basketball, and that's fine. That'll be a little bit different. I know Oregon made the Final Four run a few years ago, but, the last time we heard about Oregon basketball, it was Dana Altman complaining that fans don't show up to their games. So that's a problem a lot of Big Ten schools don't have. But, this is all about football, and Purdue's up against it in football. Purdue's got a long way to go. Purdue's come a long way. Let's not lose sight of that. For Purdue, you're glad this is happening now versus 5 years ago. Purdue's come a long way, but Purdue's got to continue getting better. Looking into the future of this, though, I have no idea what's next. All of this kind of screams that we're getting closer to revenue sharing being a thing, where obviously the players making a cut from the athletic department. The Supreme Court has gladly said, bring it on. Brett Kavanaugh has been very clear that he would welcome any case about amateurism. I think those lawsuits are already up. I think that's the Villanova one that's going on. Eventually, that's coming. Players are going to make a cut of this TV money. Once that happens, your guess is as good as mine. What's next? But from a Big Ten standpoint, I would think if the Big Ten had any appetite for Cal or Stanford, they'd be already, they'd have been added in the same press release on Friday. If the Big Ten wanted them, they'd have them. And then, the ACC's locked into that grant of rights through 2036. Of course, Florida State is, going ultra aggressive to try to get out of that, getting private equity involved. Gotta love college football. So, if the ACC falls apart, I think Notre Dame and North Carolina are where you go. But, I don't know. None of this was something that I would have thought about 10 years ago. And now that it's here, I'm not even going to try to predict what's next. Overall, it's a sad day for college football. I really think it is. I hope, you hear a lot of folks say all this is just a precursor to the top 20, top 30 programs splitting off and doing their own thing. I hope that's not true. I really hope that's not true. I don't have a good reason to say why it isn't going to be true, but, this is a stark contrast to the sport that so many of us fell in love with. And what's next? We'll find out. But I'm going to enjoy this season. I'm going to enjoy 2023. It's the last year of college football as we know it. And then in 2024, we'll see what things look like. But for today, that's all I have. Thank you for spending time with me. Next week, we will be back here to continue the countdown to kickoff, continuing to preview Purdue's 2023 season. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. Follow the show on Twitter and let me know your thoughts at Boilers Beyond on Twitter, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Can always email the show there. Until next week, guys, enjoy those fall camp practice reports and take care.